The Vatican audience hall stood in majestic silence, its marble pillars glowing under the golden afternoon light, filtering through the stained glass. The world was watching. Cameras from every major news outlet, CNN, Al Jazeera, NHK, BBC, were locked onto a single figure walking slowly down the ornate aisle. Caroline Leavitt. At just 32, she was already a name known across political and religious circles. A former White House press secretary turned special envoy to the Vatican. Her mission was meant to be symbolic, rebuilding trust between American diplomacy and spiritual leadership in Rome. But today was not unfolding like a photo op. She wore a sharp navy blue suit, her blonde hair tied back neatly, eyes focused ahead. But it was what hung around her neck that had become the center of global speculation, a silver and gold cross encrusted with what experts believed to be rubies, a mysterious piece she'd worn since her classified trip to Jerusalem last year. She reached the base of the stairs leading to Pope Leo XIV, who sat in his high-backed ceremonial chair in his white papal robes, his face expressionless. The hall was full. Cardinals, diplomats, intelligence watchers, even a few select journalists. Not one sound dared interrupt the tension. Caroline bowed slightly. Then, with careful composure, she stepped forward to offer a handshake. The Pope didn't take her hand. Instead, his voice, quiet but firm, echoed into the microphones. "Miss Leavitt," he said, "you may not wear that cross in this hall." The words struck like lightning. There was a pause so long it felt like the earth itself stopped rotating. The cameras panned in close. Her expression did not change, but her hand lowered. She blinked once. The Pope's words had been plain, but their meaning carried layers, spiritual, political, perhaps even technological. Caroline leaned forward slightly. "Your Holiness," she replied, her voice steady. "I wear it with honor, not offense." Pope Leo's fingers moved gently against his wooden chair arm. He didn't repeat himself. From the side of the room, an aide to the Pope stepped forward. His face pale, he whispered something into the pontiff's ear. The Pope nodded subtly. Then Caroline reached up and slowly removed the cross. She didn't hand it to anyone. She held it in her palm for a few seconds, almost like saying goodbye, before slipping it into the side pocket of her jacket. Only then did she extend her hand again. This time, the Pope accepted it. The handshake lasted 4 seconds, maybe 5. But the photos went viral within minutes. What was meant to be a simple diplomatic exchange had turned into a global spectacle. News anchors began shouting over each other. Analysts speculated wildly. Twitter exploded. Vatican shames U.S. envoy? Is the cross dangerous? Caroline, forced to remove her faith? Back in Washington, the State Department phones wouldn't stop ringing. But inside the Vatican Hall, the event proceeded with strange calm. A brief speech was read. The meeting concluded, and Caroline was escorted out, without further comment. As the marble doors closed behind her, Cardinal Lorenzo Bianchi approached a junior assistant in the hallway. His voice low, he said, "What? Did the Pope read before she arrived?" The assistant looked uncomfortable, glancing around before reaching into his robe. He pulled out a crumpled slip of parchment and handed it to the cardinal. Written in hurried Latin script were just a few chilling words. The girl wears the cross, but not the truth. Inside the papal private chamber, Pope Leo sat alone for a moment. He held his fingers to his temple, breathing deeply. His hand trembled slightly, as if he felt something had changed, not just in politics, but in the air itself. Outside, in the Vatican gardens, Caroline stood alone by a fountain. She touched the now empty spot on her collarbone where the cross had hung. Her phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted U.S. channel. "Do not return to D.C. until Geneva files are reviewed. We have a breach." Another buzz, this time from an unknown number. It read only, "He knows about Jerusalem." Caroline looked up slowly, her eyes meeting the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. The same eyes that once handled press briefings now held something deeper. Doubt, fear, maybe anger. But more than anything, purpose. This was no longer about tradition or diplomacy. Something ancient had just been awakened. And the next move wouldn't be made in the open. It would be made in the shadows. And Caroline had just become the center of it. The storm began not with a press release or a scandal, but with silence. By the time Caroline Leavitt left the Vatican audience hall, the world outside had already split into two narratives. One called it an act of humility. The other called it a humiliation, but neither could explain the truth. Inside her temporary diplomatic suite on the upper floor of Villa Margherita, Caroline sat in front of the mirror, still holding the cross in her hand. She hadn't spoken since returning. Her security advisor, Claire Maddox, a former MI6 analyst, stood near the window, her phone buzzing constantly with encrypted updates. That wasn't religious, Claire said finally. It was coded. That was a message. Caroline didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the cross, her fingers tracing its fine edges. Then she looked up at Claire through the mirror. Something happened before I walked in. The Pope looked afraid. Claire nodded. Then we need to know why. At that moment, a knock echoed across the suite's heavy oak door. Caroline tensed. Claire drew her sidearm. Standard practice. Now, given the Geneva leak warnings. She stepped forward cautiously. "Who is it?" she called. "It's Father Miguel," came the reply. "The Pope's private secretary. He says it's urgent." Claire looked at Caroline, who nodded once. Moments later, Father Miguel entered. A thin, sharp-featured man with eyes that seemed too observant for a priest. He bowed and took off his cap before speaking. "Miss Leavitt, the Holy Father sends you this," he said, offering a small, sealed envelope. "He could not give it to you in public." Caroline took it and turned the envelope over. No address, no seal. Just one phrase scribbled in Latin, across the front. "Lux tua est falsum." Claire translated softly behind her. "Your light is false." Caroline opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single Vatican intelligence photograph, old, grainy, time-stamped from 2016. It showed a young Caroline, barely 24 at the time, standing outside a burned church in Syria, surrounded by American operatives. "That's classified," Claire whispered. "This never made it into any records we released." Below the photo was a Vatican intelligence stamp and a handwritten line. She took something that wasn't hers. Caroline stood frozen. She remembered the mission. Operation Desert Witness, a shadow sweep through Aleppo during the Civil War, retrieving something buried beneath the ruins of a bombed-out church, something that NATO called a historical artifact. But Caroline had always known it was more than that. "What did the Pope find?" Claire asked, stepping beside her. Caroline whispered, "He knows the cross isn't just a symbol. He knows it was recovered from Syria. He thinks I took it to hide what it actually is." Claire stepped back, shocked. "You mean it's not just a family heirloom?" Caroline looked at the cross again, a slight shimmer in its ruby surface catching the light. "No," she said. "It's older than that. Much older." Suddenly Claire's phone vibrated. 3 times, sharp and urgent. A red flash notification. "Rome channel compromised. Do not communicate." She grabbed Caroline's arm. "We're burned. They're watching us." Before they could act, the power in the villa cut out. Darkness swallowed the room for a full 6 seconds before the emergency lights flickered on. Outside, distant sirens began to wail. Father Miguel stepped forward quickly. "They're already here," he said. "And it's not the Vatican Guard." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Who sent them?" The priest answered grimly. "The same people who slipped the note to the Pope." Claire opened a locked case in the corner of the room and pulled out a burner phone and 2 encrypted cards. "You've got 10 minutes to disappear," she said. "If the cross really is what they think it is, they won't stop until they've buried it. And you." Caroline didn't move. She looked once more at the Vatican photograph. She remembered the flames, the dust, and the moment she'd pulled the cross from the cracked altar stone, and the whisper she'd heard that day, one no one else seemed to remember. "You will carry the silence of the world." Now it was no longer silent. Caroline turned to Claire. "Then we don't run." Claire froze. "What?" "We go to Geneva. If this is about what we found in Syria, the files from the mission will be there. The original reports. The metadata. Everything." Claire hesitated. "That's black site territory. And the Swiss won't help. Not anymore." Caroline slipped the cross into a concealed pouch beneath her blouse. Her eyes hardened. "We're not asking for help. We're taking back the truth." Outside the villa, headlights appeared in the fog. Inside, Caroline's shadow moved against the candlelight. Somewhere in the Vatican's private chamber, the Pope closed his eyes and whispered a single word: "Forgive." But what was done could not be undone. And what was coming could not be stopped. A small jet broke through the cloud cover as it descended into a heavily restricted zone outside Geneva, an area known officially only to NATO command as Sector White. It wasn't marked on civilian maps, and access was controlled by biometric, clearance, and satellite surveillance. The pilot didn't speak. He didn't need to. His job was just to deliver the package. That package was Caroline Leavitt. She stepped off the plane wearing a heavy trench coat and dark glasses. Claire Maddox followed close behind, scanning the horizon. 2 black SUVs were already waiting. Inside one was the man they needed, someone who didn't exist on any payroll, but had access to files from every European intelligence network. His name was Lucas Reimann, former BND, now operating under a shadow clearance for the Geneva Data Security Commission. Once, he'd helped the U.S. track nuclear movements in Iran. Now he lived off the grid, moving between bunkers and cold storage data vaults. As Caroline approached the vehicle, Lucas stepped out, older than she remembered, with silver in his beard and a slight limp from an old gunshot wound. "Your name triggers alarms in 5 governments," he said dryly, offering her a hand. "But I owe you one, and I'm told you've brought the cross." Caroline didn't answer, but Claire gave him a nod. Lucas opened the back door. "Then let's get below, before someone else figures out you're here." The Geneva vault was buried beneath a lake, literally. Accessed through a boathouse designed to look abandoned, it required both retinal and voiceprint identification. Once inside, the descent was silent, metallic, cold. As the elevator dropped 15 stories below the lake bed, Claire leaned into Caroline. "This place gives me the creeps." Caroline nodded. "That's why I trust it." When the doors finally opened, they stepped into a high-security archive. Rows of sealed, temperature-controlled chambers filled with mission logs, surveillance tapes, and intelligence digests. Lucas led them to a separate room. "Everything from Operation Desert Witness is here. But there's something I didn't tell you." He keyed in a special override. The original report was altered before it ever reached the Pentagon. Someone rewrote the chain of custody. According to the files, the cross was never recovered. Caroline narrowed her eyes. "Then what did they say we found?" "A statue fragment," Lucas replied. "Broken, worthless. They scrubbed every mention of the cross." Claire stepped forward. "Who did it?" Lucas paused, then looked directly at Caroline. "Your signature is on the altered file." Silence filled the room like smoke. Caroline stepped back, shaking, her head. "No, that's impossible." Lucas pulled up a holographic projection of the report. There it was, clear as day. Authorization code, Lev 921TS, time-stamped 3 days after the Syrian extraction. Claire leaned in, eyes wide. You weren't even in country on that date. You were in Brussels, remember? Testifying at the UN. Lucas nodded. Which means someone copied your clearance. Caroline's face hardened. Or someone inside the Vatican used my name to erase the truth. Suddenly, Lucas's console beeped, sharp, urgent. Multiple pings on the outer perimeter, no ID, signatures. Claire reached for her weapon. We've been followed. Lucas cursed under his breath. There's only one way out now, the subchannel beneath the lake. He pulled a keycard from a hidden drawer and handed it to Caroline. Use this. It'll get you to the exit pod, but you need to understand. If they came all the way here, they're not just after the cross anymore. Caroline looked him dead, in the eyes. Then what are they after? Lucas took a deep breath. They're after the inscription. Claire turned sharply. What inscription? Lucas tapped a few keys, pulling up a 3D scan of the cross. Hidden inside the inner curve of the pendant was a barely visible script, so old it had taken months to decipher. It's Aramaic, but mixed with a dialect that predates Christianity. He zoomed in on the scan. The translation read, "When the false light rises, silence will awaken the stone." Claire whispered, "The false light." Caroline's voice dropped low. That's what the Pope's note meant. Lux tua est falsum. My light is false. He thinks the cross is a weapon. Lucas nodded. Or a key. To something buried. So long ago the church itself forgot it existed. Suddenly, the vault lights cut out. Red emergency strobes blinked on. Overhead, a robotic voice echoed. Security breach. Compartment lockdown initiated. Claire turned to Caroline. We have to move, now. Lucas stayed behind, typing in override codes to slow down the breach. Before they left, he shouted after Caroline, If you survive this, go to Malta. There's someone there who knows the rest. But don't trust the church, and don't trust your own memories. As the emergency exit sealed behind them, Caroline clutched the cross tighter. She didn't just feel watched. She felt chosen, and that terrified her more than anything. A harsh sea wind lashed against the blackened cliffs of Malta, as Caroline stood silently on the terrace of a crumbling watchtower. Below her, the waves struck the rocks like warning drums. Claire was beside her, eyes scanning the horizon. This place smells like history, Claire muttered, and something else, like something went wrong here. Caroline didn't answer. She was holding the cross again, tracing its outline with her thumb. Ever since the Geneva vault, something had changed. The inscription still echoed in her head. When the false light rises, silence will awaken the stone. It didn't sound like a prophecy. It sounded like a threat. They had come to Malta under aliases, moving quietly from the private airfield to a remote monastery now used as a museum. But they weren't here for tourists. They were here to meet Father Salvatore Grech, a historian priest who had been expelled from the Vatican after claiming the church had buried secrets older than Christianity itself. The man had gone silent a decade ago. Now Lucas's last message claimed he'd re-emerged, asking only for Caroline by name. They entered the monastery at dusk. Its halls were cold and stone-paved, filled with the faint scent of burning incense. A novice led them to a candlelit chamber deep underground, where Father Salvatore sat in a chair with wheels. His body had withered, but his eyes were sharp, almost glowing. "You brought it," he whispered. Caroline stepped forward. "You mean the cross?" He shook his head slowly. "Not just the cross, the weight, the burden your government tried to erase." She carefully handed the cross to him. His frail hands trembled as they held it. "This," he whispered, "was never meant to be worn. It's not jewelry. It's a cipher. A warning encoded in metal." Claire frowned. A warning for what? Father Salvatore's eyes locked onto Caroline. "You were chosen to deliver the second part, but you can only unlock it here." He wheeled back, revealing a stone slab etched with ancient symbols. In the center was an indentation, same shape as the cross. Caroline hesitated, then pressed the cross into the stone. The chamber lights flickered. A low rumble shook the room, and the slab slowly slid back, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside it, a scroll sealed in wax. The seal was Vatican red, older than any Claire had ever seen. Father Salvatore nodded. This scroll was written by Pope Celestine V. He resigned in 1294, the only pope to do so willingly. The church claimed he was weak, but the truth is, he saw what was coming. Caroline picked up the scroll, her hands shaking. What did he see? Father Salvatore whispered. A betrayal, not of politics, of faith itself. Suddenly, the chamber door burst open. A sharp shout, "Put down the scroll!" Armed men in black uniforms swarmed in, no insignia, no markings. But Claire saw the symbol on one of their gloves. The red circle. "Private papal security," she hissed. "They're not supposed to exist." Caroline backed away as the lead man raised his weapon. "Give us the scroll. No one has to die." Father Salvatore stood slowly, placing himself between Caroline and the soldiers. "She's protected," he said, "by covenant older than your orders." The man didn't blink. "You're not part of the church anymore." "Neither are you," Father Salvatore replied. And then, everything happened fast. Claire shoved Caroline behind the altar, pulling her Glock. 2 shots fired. One grazed a soldier's arm, another shattered a candle sconce. The room plunged into partial darkness. In the chaos, Caroline grabbed the scroll and the cross and sprinted toward a side passage. Father Salvatore was yelling something in Latin. Prayers? Warnings? She didn't stop to listen. The tunnel twisted, down and then up, and finally opened into the old catacombs, narrow, dark, and damp. Footsteps echoed behind her. Claire caught up, blood running from a scrape on her cheek. "Where now?" Caroline didn't hesitate. "To the crypt." Lucas said the truth is buried where the bones outnumber the prayers. They reached a sealed chamber beneath the old altar. Inside were relics, ancient, preserved, and something else. A skeleton wrapped in red robes, a ring still on its hand, a crown near the skull. Claire gasped. "That's not just any pope." Caroline knelt. The scroll trembled in her hands. "Pope Celestine V," she whispered. She turned over the crown. Etched beneath it was a phrase, barely visible under centuries of decay. "Lux veritas." The light is truth. Claire touched her. "Arm, so if yours is false..." Caroline finished. Then someone replaced the truth, centuries ago. Suddenly Caroline's phone buzzed, a secure satellite alert. "Incoming message, unknown sender. Do not return to the Vatican. You are no longer their envoy. You are their target, Claire Gat." Caroline and Claire flew out of Malta under complete silence. No media, no government contact. The plane was unmarked, charted through an old NATO route Lucas had once programmed into a military escape protocol. They landed in Corsica, but didn't stay. Hours later, they crossed into France by road, heading for Lyon. Only one place left where Caroline believed the scroll could be decrypted: the Institute for Global Religious Archives, a heavily protected underground vault beneath an abandoned church, a place so obscure, even most European governments pretended it didn't exist. Claire looked over from the driver's seat. You haven't said much since Malta. Caroline clutched the sealed scroll. Because if I start talking, I might not stop, and I need to focus. Claire nodded and turned back to the road. Inside Caroline's head, the Vatican's trap kept replaying. The staged cameras, the Pope's order to remove the cross, the leaked note, and then the men in black, the red circle, trying to erase history in a single burst of violence. She remembered what Father Salvatore had said. She wears the cross, but not the truth. What truth? And who gave that note to the Pope? They arrived at the old church by nightfall. It stood in silence, shrouded in fog, its front gate sealed, with rusted chains. But Caroline had a code, passed to her by Lucas years ago. She tapped it on her phone's secure decryption app and watched the gate slowly open. They entered the crypt beneath the chapel, where security lasers scanned their faces. Claire placed her hand on the panel. A robotic voice confirmed their entry. Welcome to IGRA, Level 3 Protocol. Clearance verified, Black Chapel. Caroline froze. Black Chapel? Claire's face darkened. It's a fail-safe system. Lucas built it after learning about a Vatican file called Dominus Exilium. He believed the church had prepared for the day someone would try to reveal ancient lies. As the vault doors opened, Caroline stepped into the long, dim corridor. Statues of saints lined the walls, except these had missing faces, chiseled out, defaced by time or silence. At the far end was a reinforced titanium cabinet with a relic processor, an old machine designed to analyze scrolls without opening them. Caroline placed the Vatican scroll inside. The machine buzzed, scanning the wax, the material, even the faint blood fingerprint on the seal. Finally, a projection screen lit up with decoded words. Celestine's Testament, Sanctum 27. The translation began. In the year of our Lord 1294, I witnessed the gathering of men who no longer served heaven but shadow. They came not with swords, but with doctrines. Their goal, to replace the word with power, the spirit with state. I resigned not in weakness, but to warn what would follow. The cross they crafted in secret would signal not faith, but control. Claire gasped. He knew. 7 centuries ago, he knew. Caroline scrolled further. The wearer of the cross will be deceived first, then blamed. The Pope will be tested. But the truth lies not in Rome, nor in Jerusalem. It lies beneath the bloodfields of Bavaria, where the Black Chapel was born. Caroline's breath caught. The Black Chapel. Claire stared at her. Caroline, this isn't just about the Vatican. It's about a political weapon, hidden, inside the church, probably still active. Caroline looked up at the screen again. One final message had appeared. Initiate Black Chapel protocol? Yes, no. Caroline hovered over the panel. What happens if I hit yes? Claire hesitated. Every agency monitoring the Vatican gets an alert. NATO, MI6, Langley, Moscow. They'll know that a forbidden protocol is being accessed. We'll start a global panic. Caroline stood in silence. She thought about what they'd uncovered. A pope's resignation centuries ago, now echoing through her life. Lucas dead. Vatican guards chasing her. A truth so old, it had been buried under cathedrals and rewritten into myth. She pressed, yes. The system flashed red. Alert broadcasted. Black Chapel initiated. Then silence. Claire turned slowly. Now we run. But they were too late. Outside, the crypt, the security lights began to flicker. Motion sensors triggered. Red dots flashed across the map on the wall, inbound strike teams. Caroline pulled out her phone. Dozens of anonymous numbers pinged her. One stood out. Lucas's old burner number, long thought deactivated. New message. They know what you triggered. Come to Berlin. Vault 17. You have 36 hours, or the scroll dies with you. Caroline looked at Claire. Claire already had the car keys. Then let's rewrite history before they erase us. They ran into the night, chased not just by soldiers, but by centuries of silence. Berlin was colder than Caroline remembered. As she and Claire crossed the old border checkpoint into the eastern sector, snowflakes fell lightly onto the windshield. They'd driven all night through the French countryside, changing cars twice, burning every signal trace. Still, Caroline had the feeling someone or something was following them. Vault 17 wasn't on any map. Lucas had once described it during a strange, whiskey-fueled night in Washington. A Cold War relic, he'd called it, where East German intelligence kept religious relics that couldn't be explained away, things too dangerous for history books. Now it was her only hope. They found the entrance beneath an abandoned factory near the Spree River. Claire keyed in a code. Nothing happened. Then Caroline placed the Vatican scroll against the metal wall. A magnetic pulse buzzed, and a hidden door opened with a hiss. Inside, the vault was lit only by emergency lights. Rusted file cabinets, decayed microfilm, and broken surveillance equipment littered the space. But at the center was a steel cylinder, marked Property of HVA, Operation Hagar. Claire wiped the dust. Operation Hagar? Caroline nodded. A failed East German operation to intercept religious communications from the Vatican in the 80s. But Lucas always believed it was a front for something deeper, something tied to the Black Chapel. She reached into her coat and pulled out the encrypted Vatican scroll. She placed it in the scanner. The screen flickered and showed an update. Decryption level 2 unlocked. New words appeared. The wearer of the counterfeit cross bears not protection, but betrayal. She must choose faith or obedience. If she obeys, the war begins. If she resists, Rome will fall. Claire turned sharply. This is prophecy-level stuff, Caroline. What if the scroll isn't just a record, but a warning? Before Caroline could answer, a low chime echoed through the vault. Then static filled the air. A hidden speaker crackled to life. Caroline, you triggered the chapel. You brought the war to Berlin. Caroline froze. The voice was filtered, but familiar. You weren't supposed to make it this far. Lucas warned you. You didn't listen, Claire shouted. Who is this? The voice paused, then eerily calm. You met me at the Vatican. You thought I was just a translator. Caroline's heart sank. Martin, the young man with the silent eyes, always present during her meetings with the Pope. He had held her coat, handed her the briefings, and now, I'm the last of the Red Circle, he said. And tonight, Berlin burns unless you give me that scroll. Suddenly, the entire vault shook. A distant explosion echoed above. Claire ran to the security monitor. They've breached the surface. Black-clad units, 5 trucks, and drones. Caroline stood frozen. We have no way out. Claire pulled open a drawer, revealing an old hatch beneath the vault's floor. There's always a way. Lucas left us one. They dropped into a narrow maintenance tunnel, the walls lined with cables from the Cold War era. Behind them, the vault roared with the sound of collapsing metal. As they moved forward, Caroline's mind raced. The prophecy, the scroll, the Vatican cross. She understood now. The ornate cross the Pope made her remove wasn't a test of faith. It was a trigger, a marker, meant to activate the Black Chapel. Protocol when seen on live television. It was why she was chosen to wear it. Not because of faith, but because she'd been watched for years. They emerged from the tunnel inside a tram station. Claire hacked into the metro systems, guiding them toward the American embassy. It was the one place where international laws might slow the Red Circle. As the train sped through Berlin's underground, Caroline finally asked the question that had haunted her since Rome. "Why me?" Claire looked at her quietly. "Because you were supposed to be the face of peace. The youngest envoy. In history. The girl with the cross. But they needed that face to mask the war they were about to start." Caroline stared down at her hands. She was no longer just a spokesperson. No longer just a survivor. She was a witness to something ancient. And maybe the only one alive who could stop it. As the train approached the station, another message came through on her secure device. "Final warning. You've seen the scroll. You've entered the chapel. You are now marked. At 300, Vatican Protocol 7 activates. The truth dies, unless you return it." Caroline looked at Claire. Claire's jaw tightened. "Then we don't return it. We publish it." Caroline nodded slowly. "To the world?" "No," Claire said, loading the scroll into a drive. "To everyone the Vatican forgot to fear." Outside the station, sirens wailed. Helicopters circled. The clock was ticking. And inside her coat, Caroline felt the pulse of the scroll, like a heartbeat, begging to be heard. Above St. Peter's Basilica, storm clouds rolled in, heavy with thunder. The world's media had gathered in silence. An emergency broadcast was scheduled, one announced just hours earlier by a rogue transmission from a U.S. embassy server in Berlin. It wasn't sanctioned by any government. It wasn't approved by any news agency. But the file was labeled Final Testament, Vatican Protocol 7, and it carried the signature of Caroline Leavitt. Inside the Sistine Chapel, deep beneath the Vatican archives, Pope Leo XIV stood alone. The cardinals had been evacuated. Security had been cut. Only a few chosen priests remained. Those who understood the real weight of what was coming. Caroline had broken the oldest law of the Vatican, revealing the Black Chapel Protocol. Now the world would hear it. In Berlin, Caroline and Claire were hiding inside a broadcast van, hijacking satellite time. Bruno, tired but alert, sat at her feet, his ears twitching. Claire gave the nod. "We're live." Caroline stared at the camera. Her face was pale, eyes tired but calm. The words she spoke were not scripted. They came from memory and from pain. "My name is Caroline Leavitt. I was once the youngest White House press secretary. I believed in diplomacy, in faith, and in truth. But I've learned something dark, something hidden from all of us. The Vatican, the U.S. government, the Eastern intelligence networks. They've all known, and they've kept it buried. Tonight, I will show you what they feared. Not a nuclear code, not a military secret, but something older. A scroll, written in a language no one fully understands, predicting a war started not with bombs, but with symbols. A cross, a word, a name. She lifted the scroll, now glowing faintly in its protective case. Then, a new image appeared on screens across the world, pages from the decrypted document, ancient and scorched, scrolling slowly. At the same time, voices from leaked Vatican archives echoed, "The wearer of the false cross shall be used as the gate. Rome shall fall, not by sword, but by silence, and the silence shall echo across nations." Then footage played, previously unreleased, of the moment Pope Leo XIV ordered Caroline to remove her cross. Viewers across the world saw his whispered words, barely audible. "The chapel is watching. If you wear it, the flood begins. Back." In Rome, the Pope watched the broadcast in silence. He made no effort to stop it. Instead, he turned to Father Esposito. "She did what we never had the courage to do." The father replied, "But at what cost?" At that moment, red lights flashed across the Vatican. Drones, unauthorized, had entered Roman airspace. The red circle had arrived. They were no longer hiding. In Berlin, Claire's monitor began to beep. "They've traced us. We've got less than 10 minutes. Caroline stood. Then let's finish it. She turned back to the camera one final time. To those watching, you may think this is madness, a story built on conspiracy. But look deeper. Look at what's happened since this scroll was discovered. Coded messages in UN speeches, assassinations passed off as accidents, a pope forced to choose silence over salvation. And me, just a voice trained to spin truth, now begging you to listen. Do not let them erase this. Record it. Copy it. Pass it forward. The war has already begun. But it won't be fought in cities. It will be fought in belief. Bruno barked, loud and sharp. The van lights flickered, then went dark. Outside, sirens wailed again. Footsteps crunched against the snow. Armed men approached. Claire handed Caroline a small chip. I uploaded the whole file to dead servers. It'll spread through the net. We did it. Caroline smiled faintly. It was never just about saving truth. It was about proving it still mattered. Suddenly, the side of the van was blown open. Smoke and light poured in. Caroline shielded, her eyes as men in red tactical gear shouted for surrender. But before they could fire, a figure stepped forward. Lucas. Alive. Wounded, but standing. He lifted his hand. Stand down. She's under Vatican witness protection. Protocol 01. The soldiers hesitated. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Caroline looked at him. You're real? Lucas nodded. You were never supposed to reach the vault, but you did. That changed everything. Then a voice came through the radio. Global coverage was in chaos. News outlets were broadcasting the footage, the scroll, the warning. Some called it fake. Others called it the beginning of a new era. But one thing was certain. The world had seen too much to forget. Back at the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV took off his ring, handed it to Esposito. I won't lead through silence anymore. Esposito looked, stunned. Then who will? The Pope gave a thin smile. The one who broke the silence. He pointed to the screen. Caroline Leavitt. In a quiet street in Berlin, Caroline walked away from the van. Claire beside her. Bruno ahead. A world behind. Them was unraveling. But something new, maybe even something better, was beginning.